What most people don't realize when building a Shopify store is that you want to be thinking of the design from the ground up. Think of what kind of journey your consumer is going to have when they land on your pages. What are they thinking about? Where is their attention pointing to? After working with thousands of merchants over the years, I have realized that this is one of the biggest blind spots that people have when they want to sell something online. It is worth asking yourself, are you designing for conversion? Are you taking your customer's cognitive load into account? Now, we will be diving further into the world of designing for cognitive load. In the second chapter, you will learn how your customer base can quickly overthink their purchases if they get overwhelmed with irrelevant information. By the end of this chapter, you will be able to put what I've taught you into practice on your store. As we've learned in the first chapter, the reason cognitive load is so critical is that it relates directly to our inherent need to conserve energy, an important survival trait. We'll now go further into the cost of overthinking your design and the steps to take to avoid cognitive overload. The more demanding a conscious mental process, such as complex multiplication, the more effort is required. That is not only true mentally, but it also has impacts physically. For example, when doing a stressful mental task, it is said that our heart rate increases and our pupils dilate. This is why we favor subconscious thinking. In other words, we prefer recalling facts such as the capital of France. This kind of thinking puts less pressure on us. However, there is another reason to consider cognitive load. If your audience is required to overthink, they routinely miss essential information. A great example that illustrates this is the invisible gorilla experiment, and we'll show you that right now.
Count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball. How many passes did you count? The correct answer is 15 passes. But did you see the gorilla?
See if you can pay attention to this video. Did you catch the gorilla at all? In the experiment, their cognitive load was so high that they missed valuable additional information. Given that cognitive load can cause us to miss crucial information and that we inherently avoid having to think too hard, the usability of your storefront is crucial. An understanding of psychology can really assist us here to address these challenges. Specifically, these three principles that we'll dive deeper into: mental models, choice paralysis, and perception of ease. Over time, each person builds a mental model of how their world works. These mental models are basic assumptions and processes that help us make decisions and complete tasks on a daily basis. For example, where would somebody find the tomatoes in a supermarket? It could be argued that they should be kept in the fruit aisle since they are a fruit after all. However, people expect them to find them with the salad because we use them in a salad. As humans, we have a mental model that establishes this expectation. The same is true for online shopping. You might have a radically different mental model of your product from your customer base because your knowledge is way more in depth. Your understanding of your product has become intuitive as you do not need to think about it in a conscious way. This is also true for the design of your storefront. As an experienced web user, you have way more accurate mental models of web functions, patterns, and standards than most people do. For example, professionals are often shocked to find that many people type domain names into Google and then go to the first result instead of accessing the domain directly from their address bar. This may seem like wasted effort, but it's the process that some users are comfortable with. The concept of sticking with a method that works despite its inefficiencies also demonstrates the dangers of breaking your customer base's mental model. I'm sure you've seen your friends and family experiencing frustrations over website changes. Even though the site might have become more efficient, you've possibly experienced this yourself. A lot of my customers experience this as well, so you're definitely not alone. Well, this happens because the site now breaks the mental models people have built up around how to use it. That is why so many people like using Amazon. It is not about whether it is easy to use or not. They like it because they know it. Amazon has never done anything radical with their design. Instead, they have incrementally changed themselves over time, ensuring that they never break their users' mental model of the site. Then there is analysis paralysis. You may have heard of this before, but in case you haven't, this illustrates the concept of choice paralysis. Essentially, the more choices you present to your customer, the longer they will take to make a decision. It turns out that there is a predictable relationship between the number of choices and the time it takes for people to make a decision. This is known as Hick's Law, named after William Edmund Hick, who made the discovery. If it takes too long to make a decision, people tend to give up entirely, also called choice paralysis. In the e-commerce world, offering more products is not always better. If you want to reduce cognitive load, start by reducing the number of choices, as it will overwhelm your customers and reduce their conversion rate. Here's a pro tip. It is advisable to instead find a niche where you can target your customer base. For example, picking between 24 varieties of jam might be challenging, but choosing between 24 different food types would not be as hard because the choices are distinct. The same is true with navigation. Even 3 choices of navigational items can be overwhelming if there is no apparent difference between each. The final factor to consider when attempting to reduce cognitive load is aesthetics. We have an inherent bias towards things that we perceive as attractive. If something looks visually pleasing, we tend to see it in a more positive light, including how easy it is to use. It feels more natural to use, and we tend to persevere longer. Aesthetics have other psychological benefits too. Attractiveness is linked with trustworthiness and value because of something called the halo effect, which is our tendency to judge an entire experience based on a single initial characteristic. So in the case of your e-commerce website, a user's initial impression of the design could be enough to determine the sense of trust in your offering. I'd like to point out that special care should be given when attempting to alter people's perceptions. Psychology is a powerful tool of persuasion, and the temptation to overuse it is dangerous for both the user and the business. Next on your list, we will be reviewing the concept of defaults. This is where you will be learning how to set default settings in the design process for your customer base. See you there.